Charles Duhigg is a reporter for the New York Times. He's also the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Power of Habit, about the science of habit formation in our lives, companies, and societies. His latest book, Smarter, Faster, Better, explores the science of productivity and why, in today's world, managing how you think rather than what you think can transform your life. His Times series on the iEconomy won a Pulitzer Prize. Charles has appeared on This American Life, N.P.R, the Newshour with Jim Lehrer, and Frontline. He's a graduate of Yale and received an MBA from Harvard Business School. We sat down with him at the Rotman School of Management in Toronto to talk about how his work can help us in pharma.
Hi, my name's Jill Donahue. I'm the author of EngageRx. I'm on a mission to help lift pharma, to help them build trust and open doors. As part of that mission, I'm here today chatting with Charles Duhigg. Charles, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks for having me, absolutely.
You're going downstairs soon to speak to a few hundred people at Rotman School of Management.
That's right, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And we wanted to take some of your lessons and apply them to our world in the pharmaceutical industry before you went down there. So I was mentioning to you how much I love both of your books. When I first read The Power of Habit, I thought it was so applicable to us. You said in there, one of the quotes that I took was, habits can be changed if we understand how they work.
That's exactly right. We're sort of living through this golden age of understanding habit formation and productivity, all these things that used to be black boxes, thanks to our ability to sort of observe more closely, but most importantly, our ability to learn about the neurology of certain behaviors is really opened up how we understand how things happen. And habits is a great example of that. One of the things that we've learned is that every habit has these three components: a cue, a routine, and a reward. And if you can figure out how to tinker with those pieces, you can learn how to reshape any behavior.
That's what I found so exciting about that first book. So when, in our world with pharma reps, for example, calling on physicians, I realized through your book that those physicians aren't making decisions all day long, but a lot of it is probably habits,
I'm
right?
sure so. 40 to 45% of what we do every day is a habit.
Okay.
And so as a result, any sort of patterned behavior that we get into, our brain loves to latch onto. It loves to make it into something that happens automatic.
Right.
And this is great evolutionarily, because the more that we can free up our brain to, instead of having to think about what you're going to eat and how you walk to work, to instead dream up spears and fire and aircraft carriers and video games, the more that we are able to leverage our ability to think. The problem is that sometimes we can fall into habits without really thinking too hard about them.
And that's when the medical error can occur, for example.
That's exactly right.
So what would be your number one tip, for example, for pharma reps, as far as changing habits of healthcare professionals to help them make better choices for their patients?
I mean, I think that the underlying principle is that every habitual behavior has a reward.
Okay.
And so you get to choose what you're rewarding, right? If your goal is to get doctors or other medical professionals to think more deeply about the choices that they're making, you have to create rewards for that thought.
Okay, tell me more.
And so as a result, if it's you see a particular diagnostic pattern, you automatically grab the prescription pad, you automatically write the script that you do every time. If there's nothing to interrupt that, then it's going to become a habit. People are going to start reacting automatically. But the more that pharma reps, or really anyone for that matter, can stop and say, look, what's something that can interrupt this pattern, that can force you to think? This is why checklists in medical situations are so powerful, is because as you go down the checklist, it says, step number 4, stop for a minute. Figure out, are you making the right choice?
Okay.
Sometimes we need a contemplative habit that simply forces us to take a step back and ask, am I doing the right thing right now?
Okay, and that can be a big role for the pharma rep, right? To help them
Absolutely.
contemplate and disrupt their habitual choice.
Helping physicians reflect on the choices that they've made, right?
Okay.
To look at some of your latest patients and say, look, what happened? You ended up prescribing this particular drug.
Yeah.
Explain to me why. Was that the right choice to make? I know that there's studies that suggest that you could have acted otherwise.
So helping with that deeper contemplation.
Absolutely.
You talk about the power of the 5 whys, and I was wondering how we could use that as pharma reps.
So the 5 whys is this kind of old process that comes from the Toyota production system.
Yeah.
When Toyota came to North America to open up its first car plant, it essentially revolutionized how manufacturing is done. This is the birth of lean and agile manufacturing and methodologies. Of course, today we know that there's lean healthcare and agile software processes. This method has spread throughout the business world. And what it basically says is two things. First of all, the person who is closest to a problem should be empowered to solve that problem.
Okay.
Rather than command and control and hierarchies that say that the boss should make a decision, what you should do is you should empower whoever's closest to a situation, because oftentimes they're the ones with the most knowledge. They've seen the most about the situation. Obviously in medical settings, this is incredibly critical because it means empowering nurses and PAs and nurse practitioners and med techs, people who might have some type of insight into a particular patient that the physician might not have. Empowering them to speak up, to make their opinions known is incredibly powerful.
Well, and likewise in the pharma world, right? Empowering the pharma reps. There was a phase where we were rather dictating what they should do and say, but you're saying the research shows that we should be empowering them because they're closest to the problem at the front end. Absolutely.
They know the docs they're talking to. They know the problems that those docs are saying. Being able to interface with them and say, look, I'm going off script, but here's a way that I think that you can solve this problem. That's incredibly powerful.
Okay, great. Breaking our own habits is important too. So in Smarter, Faster, Better, you teach us how to change how we plan our day, for example.
That's exactly right.
What would be the number one thing that can make the biggest difference in how satisfied I might feel at the end of the day if I were a pharma rep, for example?
Well, so I think the biggest thing is to understand that there is so much about life that pushes us to be reactive. So for millennia, our brain evolved in a situation where the ability to multitask was a great thing, right? Okay. If I'm someone who can plant crops and look for predators at the same time, I'm more likely to survive than someone who can just plant crops or just look for predators.
Right.
And so our brain has been encouraged to develop in a way that multitasking is something that's rewarding, seen as good. It contains a novelty value. That was great until about 100, 150 years ago, when the Industrial Revolution started, particularly in the last 30 years with the digital information revolution, where we're surrounded by potential distractions. I don't think anyone would say, the reason I succeed now is because I can multitask at 12 things at once.
Right.
Instead, what they say is, multitasking is what drags down my colleagues. I want to learn how to focus.
Okay, great.
And so the most productive people, they cultivate mental habits, behavioral habits, that allow them to stop and contemplate. These are known as contemplative devices. And a great example is the to-do list, right? We all write to-do lists. But there's a right and a wrong way to write a to-do list. The wrong way is just to jot down a bunch of things that you want to get done. Because what it's not doing is it's not encouraging you to prioritize. It's not encouraging you to think about what you should be doing. So what psychologists and neurologists say is the right way to write a to-do list is that at the top of that list, you should write your biggest tasks. The things that usually you write at the bottom of the list, right? And you put off until tomorrow. Put that at the top of the list and really make yourself question, what is my biggest goal? Like, what am I trying to work for today, this week, this month? If I could only do one thing, what's the most important thing? And then put it someplace where you're reminded of it constantly. The problem with writing a big goal, though, is that it can be overwhelming. You don't know where to start.
Don't know how to do it.
That's exactly right. So what folks suggest is that underneath that stretch goal, that big ambition, you use some system that forces you to break it into a plan. One of the most popular is SMART goals, right? You take some component of what you want to get done, and you figure out, and it's called SMART because it spells out S-M-A-R-T. What specifically do I want to get done this morning? How am I going to measure success? Is that achievable, right? How do I make it realistic? Do I need to turn off email for 90 minutes or clear my calendar? What's the timeline for this task I want to get done? The reason why this is powerful, having this stretch goal and this SMART goal side by side, is that it gets you into a habit of doing two things. Of trying to figure out what's my top priority, and then how do I make that into a plan? How do I make it something that's actionable? That is the key of productivity. Because you're tapping into these deep-seated instincts to try and jump on something right away, to get active, to have a plan. But at the same time, you're forcing yourself to ask yourself, is this the most important thing? Am I doing what I really is my top priority?
Right, because I think I had fallen into that, right, where I'll just create a list of things that I could easily do.
Absolutely.
But what you forced me to do after reading that, and I tried it like in preparing for this interview, for example, I said, prepare for a Charles Duhigg interview. You can't just check that off. I had to have some reflection to go, what am I going to do? And then I broke it down. For 1 hour, I'm going to do this. For 1 hour, I'm going to do that. Right?
It makes a huge difference.
And
it's not like this SMART goals is like you don't have to use SMART goals, right? But what you do need is you need a system that forces you to say, how do I make this accomplishable?
Yes.
How do I come up with a plan? But at the same time, not fall so in love with checking things off your to-do list that you forget to think about your biggest priorities.
You're not getting anywhere, doing lots of checks, but not achieving.
That's exactly right.
Great. So at the beginning of the day, take the time to reflect, or the end of the day before, take the time to reflect, to think through those stretch goals. Because that's the other thing. Are we pushing ourselves to have a stretch goal, or just the easy ones?
That's exactly right. And it's not so much just taking the time, it's having some device, right?
Okay.
That device could be writing a note to yourself,
okay.
writing a to-do list. It could be a conversation you always have with your spouse.
Yeah.
It could be that I walk home and during my walk I don't look at my smartphone. Yeah. I force myself to kind of reflect on what happened that day. Life is so busy that it's easy to mistake busyness with productivity.
Yes,
but the more that we build a device, some type of break into our day, something we do that gives us the time to think, that's how we become productive.
I love it, because that gave me permission to do that, to take that time to go for the walk, to think. And I've really noticed a big difference since I started doing it. So thank you for that permission.
Good.
Now, this has been out for how long now?
3 weeks, I think.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what are people saying to you that the most about it so far? What have you noticed people are taking away from it?
I think much like what you just said, the biggest thing is people giving them permission to actually become productive.
Okay,
right?
great.
There is this cultural bias to feel like we should be busy all the time.
Yes.
And for a long time...
That's the answer, right? How are you? Busy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for a long time, busyness and productivity were one and the same.
Yes.
They were synonymous. But that's not true anymore. You could spend your entire day replying to emails and not get anything important done.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of workplace environments that encourage us to be busy.
Yeah.
The more that you can say to give yourself permission to say, I need to take a step back, I need to give myself a break, I need to think about what I'm doing, the more genuinely productive you'll become.
Awesome. That's great. You're going downstairs momentarily to speak to the group.
That's
What
right.
is the one thing you want them to think or do differently as a result of your talk today?
I think the biggest thing is, and this is my biggest takeaway from writing the book, is literally anyone can become more productive.
Beautiful.
Right? There's this concept that to be super productive, you have to have gone to the right schools, or be super smart, or be born to parents who taught you great habits, or work for a company that takes care of your dry cleaning for you. And that's not actually true. Like, what we know from studies is that most of the most productive people, they don't come from these hugely advantaged backgrounds. They come from backgrounds where there was some disadvantage, where they had to think more deeply about what they were doing. They had to choose the better goals. They had to think about how they worked. That's why they're productive, is because they've already programmed into their life some time to think about what's actually important, to ask themselves, what is productivity? What does it mean to me? Once you do that, that's when you start getting ahead.
Awesome. I want to acknowledge you and thank you for all the thought that you put into it to help us. It's going to make a tremendous difference.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Charles.
Absolutely.